Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission study session. It is presently Monday, July 7th, 2025, 6:30 p.m. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the commissioners for their service. And we will begin with item A1, discuss regular agenda items, which takes us to item C1, consider approval of the June 23rd, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners, any errors, typos? All right. That sounds good. No errors? Okay. With that, we'll move on to item D1, which will be a public hearing. Conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a detailed site plan, including special exceptions for an office warehouse development on approximately 9.44 acres located at 2271 Morgan Parkway, and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Happy to answer any questions you might have now over this case. So this is a request for a detailed site plan for an office warehouse development with special exceptions. Now, because this is a brand new ground up development in PD 97, we would be required to go before you all in City Council with the request anyway, but because they're requesting special exceptions, we're having to hold this public hearing. So happy to answer any questions you might have now.
Thank you, Brian. Questions, discussion for staff? Go ahead, Harold.
The barn, why do they want to do away with the barn? That's one of the requests.
Yes, I might let the applicant get into that a little bit more, but I would say it was just due to the site design and the way the site is laid out. They didn't feel it would be conducive to what the design they're proposing.
Do we know if they have photos or any kind of?
I can actually pull up the landscape plan, if you'll bear with me just a moment. Let me put this on full screen.
I didn't know where the barn was going.
So the berm
Should be located per the current ordinance.
Right, so PD 97 requires a landscape berm to be installed along any public street, which in this situation would be Morgan Parkway. So it would be required here, but like I said, due to the site configuration, the applicant felt that wouldn't be conducive. But as I will point out in my presentation, they are making up for it by installing landscaping all throughout the site, which totals 42.7%. Which is well above what PD 97 requires for landscaping, because currently PD 97 only requires 10% of the site to be landscaped. They're proposing to landscape 42.7%.
Along those same lines, and I just thought of this, what's the elevation there in the floodplain? Do we know how close, or is this a foot out of the floodplain, or?
If you'll bear with me just a moment, I can bring that up on our interactive map.
That property has flooded in years past.
Brian, one of the documents in the additional documents that was in the package had elevations on it, on the blueprint.
Oh, were you talking about the building elevations or whether or not the,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
No, I'm not, I'm talking about the elevation.
You're talking about the actual elevation of the property itself. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Right, we could pull the floodplain map and provide it during regular session. That works.
Okay. If you'll bear with me just a moment. Okay, so this is the U.S. flood area layer from our interactive map. So this is the subject property right here. So it appears part of the property is within the flooding area. I would point out that our Public Works Department is part of our Development Review Committee, and they did review this site plan with us, and what the applicant is proposing does meet all of their requirements.
Thank you, Brian. Further questions for staff? Yes, thank you.
Brian, is there a setback requirement in PD 97?
Yes. I believe it is 20, I believe there's a required front yard setback of 25 feet. If you bear with me just another moment, I will confirm that for sure. Okay, so these are the required setbacks for the property. So a front yard setback of 15 feet, 20 for the side, and 20 for the rear.
Okay, so it appears that this just barely meets that because it's 15 feet from the sidewalk, according to the schematics that we were given.
As long as they meet those minimum setbacks, they're good.
Is that why they don't want to plant the trees along there, is because it's too narrow? I don't understand why. I mean, that's a hike and bike trail, and right next to it is something like 150 feet of a 40-foot high wall with no landscaping relief whatsoever for virtually the entire length of that building.
You're talking about here in front of Morgan Parkway?
Yeah, and that's where that sidewalk is designated to be part of the hike and bike trail.
Correct.
And so, again, my question is there is zero landscaping relief for virtually the entire length of that building and nothing but a 40-foot high wall. Is that correct?
That's partially correct. So the applicant is proposing to plant some trees along the front of the building. These 5 trees right here and these 3 existing trees will remain. Again, I would like the applicant get into the specifics of why they chose this particular design. But
And if I understand correctly, in looking at, I beg your pardon, the satellite, the land north of this is a floodway easement
Creek.
that is a creek that is basically brush and forested area, right? So they're going to plant these 7 new trees right next to an area that's already forested at the northeast corner.
you're talking about these
Yeah,
trees right here?
yeah. So they're using that to meet the landscape requirement, but they're planting it adjacent to an area that's already got lots of trees because it's a wild flood easement, right?
Right. So, like I said, again, given the site layout, the applicant felt that this was the best configuration for the landscaping. Like I said, again, to the site configuration, again, I would let them get into the specifics, but just again, I would emphasize that they are exceeding the minimum landscaping threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Further questions for staff? Our discussion? All right, so thanks again, Brian.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to item D2 for our study session. Conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a zoning amendment for industrial development on approximately 7.48 acres located at 2665 to 2775 Villa Creek Drive within PD 74 zoning district and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Chair Raley and members of the P&Z. Brett Mangum with the Planning Department, lead planner. And the next case on the agenda is on Villa Creek. Let me pull up the site plan. Happy to answer any questions on this. This is a current site which has 4 office buildings on the property at present. Those would be demolished in favor of building a new from the ground up 126,000 square foot warehouse distribution center. This is a similar type of use as previous cases that we've seen in the past couple of months, just to the west of this site, down along Ford Road and Villa Creek Drive. Very similar style and aesthetic of the building. Again, I'll go through the more detailed presentation when we get into the public hearing at 7 o'clock, but if you have any questions for us in advance, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in the code, when there's a wall mentioned, it's usually a masonry wall. And this is requesting to put in a wooden fence. So maybe you could give a little background and why a masonry wall to begin with? What is it about a masonry wall, and why would a wooden fence be a good substitute?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner Miller. The masonry wall, from a planning perspective, they're usually a little bit more durable, long-lasting as far as the lifespan of the material goes. Wood fences also tend to be blown over in storms a little more easily. The masonry is a more substantial material. It holds up better over time. The requirement in the ordinance that you mentioned is typically found when you have non-residential uses abutting single-family or duplex zoning. So this is a kind of a unique case because you have single-family zoning to the north, which is the Dallas Christian College site. So it's zoned for single-family, but the land use doesn't match that.
Right, but even being a school, wouldn't it also call for a good neighbor fence? I mean, I'm just wondering, if you go there, that whole area now is just going to be butt up, and it's going to be a lot of traffic, I can tell. So I'm just wondering, what would be a reason for us to approve a wooden fence and not just go ahead and require the masonry wall that's in the code?
I don't think staff necessarily has a preference one way or the other, as long as there is screening. The ordinance requirement would be the masonry fence per PD 74. So anything in opposition to that, so a wood fence, for example, what they're requesting just has to be approved by you and City Council.
And then just one other thing, so with these developments going in that area, they going to the east, they end up at Josie Lane in a very difficult, those streets that come into Josie Lane, it's hard to get across. The traffic, and we're building, doing a good job. We're going to be building a whole number of buildings to the west of this. Are we at some point going to be getting to some kind of an issue with the design of these roads and the way they end up on Josie Lane?
My understanding is currently there are some posted signs when you're going northbound on Josie that say truck traffic is prohibited. I believe that's due to the load zone restrictions for the bridge that's further down where it crosses the creek. Those signs could potentially be expanded in the future if need be. I do recall from previous cases that we looked at last month, the applicant did say that a lot of the truck companies have special software that they use to route trucks away from conflict points, such as the one you mentioned at Josie and Villa Creek. So I would maybe defer to the applicant a little bit more to see if the clients here would be using that same kind of software.
Right.
Those would be the main things that I would think of.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Go ahead.
Back to the wall, just for a second. What about the requirement for height of the wall? I mean, are we talking 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet?
I believe the specs call for an 8 foot. You can go up to 8 foot 6 inches. Anything beyond that would be outside of the code.
Do we ever get any data, science data on like the acoustics of, say, masonry wall versus vegetation, trees, shrubs? The concern I have is the 3 residences to the northeast and the apartments next door in terms of noise. I mean, if this is going to be a bulk storage building and we put trailers in the back, suppose that they come in there and they're unloading pipes or valves or something, dropping on the concrete at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, that could happen. How do we control that for the college kids next door who that building may or may not be a dormitory. I'm not sure what it is. But that's going to be disruptive. Plus, currently, there's a nice concrete drainage ditch behind it with blooming crepe myrtle bushes, and it looks really nice, even though the office buildings are vacant. So, I mean, we're changing the acoustics where, you know, it's the aesthetic view from the college and from the apartment project. And I'm trying to help make this deal. How do we get walls, shrubs, bushes, those kinds of things that may help us and, you know, and may help the owner be a better neighbor, for lack of a better term.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Freilich. I think, I haven't seen any data personally, which you refer to as far as the noise or the aesthetics, acoustics of different sound materials. That's not contained within the ordinance that I've seen. We did in the design process kind of work with the applicant because it's a concern of staff as well, especially with the residential multifamily to the east. That's where people are going to be living. So that's a big concern, as well as the college and the single family areas that are catty corner to the northeast. So we did suggest kind of a multi-pronged approach with screening fence and potentially additional plantings such as double plantings or a berm. But this is the compromise that was supplied by the applicant. If you, as a P&Z, are not happy with what you see, you could add conditions pertaining to the screening if you would like enhanced measures of whatever type you would see fit.
Don't the landscaping requirements have a height issue on the shrubbery? I mean, bushes minimum 20 inches, 36 inches. I mean, seems like I remember something like that.
As far as I know, the plantings just have to be, the trees have to be a certain caliper inch when they're planted, but I'm not familiar with the height restriction for plantings, just with the fences, the 8.5 foot limit.
Further questions? Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. That they are planting a row of shrubbery against the fence, but all of the shrubbery is on the property side of the fence, correct? So whereas today, say the apartments look on to a nicely landscaped, attractive office building, tomorrow they'll look at an 8-foot fence, period, correct?
Wooden fence.
Wooden fence.
Yes, Commissioner Trapp, that is correct.
And the same on the north side.
Yes, the only distinction would be the north side has the drainage ditch, whereas the eastern property is just flat.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Good.
So we do have a good number of warehouses in this area, like Ford Road, Denton Drive, Villa Creek. Do we know how many warehouses have been approved for construction in this area?
To my knowledge, just the previous 4 that were approved last month. And I'm not aware of any else upcoming in the pipeline at this point. Of course, that could change
Sure.
any day.
And then my next question following up on that is, do we know what the occupancy status of the building is currently? And do we have an idea of what warehouse occupancy looks like in Farmers Branch?
I think the applicant might be a better resource to answer that question as far as the current tenancy of the building. To my understanding, this is a spec building, so I don't know if there's a client lined up to immediately occupy the space once it's completed, but it's my understanding that it's a spec building.
Okay, and then one more for you. With respect to the 2045 plan, can you differentiate for me between what regional commercial is and industrial?
Yes, that's a good question, Commissioner Kirby. So the comprehensive plan does have a distinction. If you think of regional commercial, which is what this area is designated, that would be an area kind of similar to like Midway and 635, where you have a lot of big box stores, you have a lot of fast food establishments, retail establishments, creating that synergy. And it's serves a larger area than just like a neighborhood commercial center. So it pulls people from all over the city of Farmers Branch as well as surrounding cities. The industrial would be more of a less intensive use, where you have warehouse parks and light industrial parks, differentiating it from like heavy manufacturing areas that are going to be noisome, odorsome, more problematic type industrial uses. So it would be almost similar to an office park, but you'd have a lot more light industrial and warehouse users and truck traffic.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Further questions?
Sure, just one- So what activities would be allowed by right in this building?
So if this is approved as presented, the use that they're looking for is specifically warehouse and distribution, and I can read that off to you. And that would cover over what would be allowed if approved. All right, so warehouse and distribution, an establishment primarily engaged in the receipt, storage, and distribution of goods, products, or materials. Specifically excluded are self-storage or mini warehouses, retail sales, manufacturing, assembly, or product processing.
What about outside storage?
Outside storage would not be allowed. Everything would have to be, all the activity would have to be contained within the building with the exception of
Is there any
parking.
time limit on hours of operation under, do they specifically talk about that anywhere?
Not in this request. There's no hours of operation limitations as currently written.
Didn't we put something on the other buildings on Ford Road last year, hours of operation?
I can't recall, but Sarah may have a
I think we did.
Yes, there were hours of operation applied to the two warehouse buildings located north of Villa Creek. With the most recent request, the two buildings south of Villa Creek, where the Wyndham Garden and the vacant tract is, those were exempt from hours of operation restrictions. But for the north, I believe it was 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. And that was a condition that the P&Z Commission added as part of their discussion. So that's certainly on the table if you feel it's appropriate for this request.
Yeah, that went to council and got approved though, didn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Further discussion, questions? All right, thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. All right, and with that, we will return back to our study session item A2, discuss agenda items for future Planning and Zoning Commission consideration. Commissioners, items for further discussion?
Yeah, just artificial intelligence. I'm just curious if there's somebody could do a presentation on AI and planning or urban planning. Like, are there any tools that are being implemented? How is it being used?
Thank you.
This is not artificial intelligence. This is just more work for the staff. Sarah, this afternoon when you showed me your telephone where you had made a drive-through of the property and we talked about the drainage ditch and the flowers, why couldn't we have something like that every time we do this, where when the staff is out there doing their work, Sarah's out there with her telephone taking photos, because it might help one of us who had not been out to the property to get that visual. I mean,
Sure,
how
no.
hard would that be?
It's not difficult. What I was showing you was just the Google Street View, so we can pull that up anytime. We do take site photos when we go on site to post signage, and so I think Brett actually has some on a supplemental slide if we need to reference it during the regular session, but we can certainly provide those for future
Well,
uses.
that was really nifty for me to see that you had gone to that much trouble. And I was just hoping maybe you could share that. Since you're doing it, you could share it with the group.
Yeah, we will make sure to have site photos available for reference during the discussions.
it's not that difficult then to take that and put it on our viewers up here.
Yep, we've got them ready to go, so.
Well, can you, in
Y'all
Google
think
Earth,
that's okay?
in Google Maps or Earth, can you record a walkthrough? Can you record a walkthrough and then just share like a half a minute or a minute video that is a literal sort of Google?
Depends on the scenario. It's, we try to avoid presenting videos when possible, just due to, technical complications. But sometimes the applicant in the past has done like a SketchUp kind of modeling of their development. And we can certainly do things like this where we pull up the street view or go on site to take photos, whatever is relevant to the discussion, so.
Thanks. Thanks again, Sarah. Yep. Is that it?
That's, okay, I'm happy.
All right. So with that, we will conclude our study session meeting. It is presently 6:56, and we will reconvene at 7. Thank you all. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is presently 7 p.m. Monday, July 7th, 2025. I'd like to begin by thanking the commissioners for their service. Up first, we have citizen comments. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any matter that is not posted on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission should complete a citizen's comments registration form and submit it to the chair prior to the start of the meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit for each citizen to speak, with a reasonable limitation on speakers on any one topic or item, with a maximum of 15 total minutes on the same topic item. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. The Planning and Zoning Commission is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by a speaker during citizen comments. When called, please approach the podium and state your name and address prior to beginning your comment. Please direct all comments to the commission and not to the audience. This evening, we have no one signed up for the citizen comments section. So we'll proceed with our regular agenda items, beginning with item C1, consider approval of the June 23rd, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners?
I move that the minutes be approved as documented.
Thank you. Seconded. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor to approve the minutes as documented? All right, that carries. And with that, we will move to our public hearings. First item D1, conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a detailed site plan, including special exception for an office warehouse development on approximately 9.44 acres located at 2271 Morgan Parkway, and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, well, good evening, Commissioners. I'm Brian Campbell, planner with the Planning Department, here to present to you tonight case number 25 SP03 for 2271 Morgan Parkway. So this is a 9.44 acre site located at 2271 Morgan Parkway, which is zoned Plan Development District number 97. The applicant is requesting approval of a detailed site plan for an office warehouse development, similar in nature to the existing development located at 2261 Morgan Parkway and other developments within the area. The applicant is requesting 3 special exceptions with this, hence why we're doing the public hearing tonight. So as mentioned, this is a detailed site plan request for a single-story office and warehouse building, which will measure approximately 82,000 square feet. With this, the applicant will be providing 107 parking spaces on site, as well as landscaping throughout the property, the totality of which will be 42.7% of the site. The elevations will consist mostly of masonry with enhanced glazing and articulation on the western and southern facades for enhanced architectural aesthetics. And the applicant is also proposing to install a 12-foot hike and bike trail along Morgan Parkway, which will essentially act as an extension of the existing trail in front of 2261 Morgan Parkway. So as mentioned, the applicant is requesting 3 special exceptions with this request. The first of which is the location of off-street parking. So PD 97 typically requires most of the parking to be located either behind the building or out of view of the public. The applicant is requesting that 67% of the parking be located in front of the building to the west for the convenience of customers, employees, and other users of the building. The landscaping shrubbery provided throughout the site will screen the parking. The second special exception, the applicant is requesting not to install the landscape berm. PD 97 requires any portion of a property adjacent to a public street to have a landscape berm installed in that area, which in this situation would be along Morgan Parkway. The applicant has chosen, is requesting not to install this berm, but instead landscape the area throughout the site as illustrated on the landscape plan. And then with the final special exception, PD 97 requires that street trees be planted along the perimeter of the PD as well as along any public street or public travelway, which in this situation, again, would be along Morgan Parkway, which would be the northern property line in this situation for this subject property, which measures approximately 407 feet. So given that they would be required to plant a tree approximately 30 feet, spaced out, that would be a total of 14 trees that would be required to be planted here. The applicant is proposing to only plant 8 of those trees and provide the rest of those trees throughout the rest of the property. So getting into the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan designates this subject property and the area surrounding it as commercial and industrial employment center. So with this designation, the comprehensive plan recommends a healthy mix of commercial and industrial uses that will act as employment centers for the city. So recommended land uses include office, research and development, light industrial and manufacturing, and warehousing and logistics. So with that, the proposal is consistent with the Farmers Branch 2045 plan. I would also reemphasize that PD 97 does allow the office warehouse use by right, and it will be similar in nature to the other existing developments in the area. So on June 27th, we did mail 7 notification letters to all affected property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, as we require now. On that same day, we also posted a zoning sign on the property. Letters were also mailed to the Carrollton Farmers Branch and Dallas ISDs. As of this evening, we have not received any correspondence on this case. So that concludes my presentation. We do have representatives from the applicant here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address any questions you might have as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. First, any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Yeah, one, could you go back 2 slides
Of course.
so running along Interstate 35, the property line, and then that is a right-of-way. Is that a textile right-of-way, the rest of that green area? Like, what is that?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, it is part of the text right away.
If it's a right-of-way, are you allowed to could you still plant in it, understanding that at some point if they use the right-of-way, it has to be taken out? I mean, is it forbidden to plant? Like, this is obviously a green area that's getting nothing, and I'm wondering if it's because of that property line, and is there some possibility of still doing something even though it is a textile right-of-way?
I would let the applicant address that question.
And we'll have you come in, if that's okay. We're just going to put a parking lot on that one, and we'll come back around to it, and if that's okay. And we'll just continue first with Brian if there's any other questions for staff.
Yes.
Brian, could the applicant plant a hedge alongside the building to replace trees? Is there an either or? Is there some kind of formula that may cover that?
Potentially, I would let the applicant address that question, but if you would like that to be a condition of approval, you're welcome to make that recommendation.
What I'm asking is there something in our plan or ordinance that, instead of planting a 4-inch caliber tree, you can plant 3 20-inch wax leaf ligustrums? I mean, do we have something in writing like that?
Right, so currently PD 97 does require the installation specifically of a berm. I believe that has to be at least 3 feet in height. So any deviations from that would likely require some sort of an amendment. But like I said, since the applicant is requesting this special exception, you can make that as part of your recommendation for approval of a condition, if you would like to see that. But PD 97 does require the berm.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Go ahead.
The landscape plan that we saw specified 2 different types of shrubs that would be used on the property. One was dwarf Buford holly, and the other was Texas sage.
Correct.
And when I zoomed in around to try to see what was going to go along the I-35 frontage road, the graphic was not sufficiently detailed. So my question is, what kind of bushes are those?
Let me see if it'll help if I can I'll pull up the
It-
blow
it-
up of the
When I
landscape.
zoomed in, it just became pixelated and was not sufficiently detailed to distinguish between the graphics for the two different shrubs they're planting.
Sorry
They were
about that.
very similar images.
Okay.
It might be a question for the applicant.
Yeah, don't.
See, so
I
if-
don't
there
know if
they
this
are.
is going to allow
One
me-
has like four little hatch marks, and the other has three little hatch marks. And when you zoom in on all those shrubberies, you can't tell.
Yeah, I believe that's the hollies. Along the I-35 corridor, we're talking about this area,
Yeah,
correct? Yes, I believe those should be the dwarf hollies.
So, and dwarf hollies get up to, what, 4 feet?
Yeah, you have to trim them on the top of them.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Further questions for staff? All right, we do have the applicant here. If you wouldn't mind, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Peyton Schwartz, and I live at 8177 Midtown Boulevard, Dallas, Texas, 75231. In terms of the planting in the right-of-way for the TxDOT road, we are not able to plant in that because it is technically not our property, and like you said, if they did want to expand that road in the future, they would have to rip out anything in that area. We do already have approval from TxDOT for that connection, just as a side note.
Thank you. And further on those are the hollies in
I
the,
believe so, yes.
okay. All right, further questions for our applicant? Yes, please. That's you, Harold.
Why did they want to do away with the berm?
So the landscape berm, due to the finished floor elevation of the building, it is already above the 3 feet height that the landscape berm that would need to be. So the berms wouldn't provide any type of screening to the building. Also, there's just lack of room with the 12-foot hike and bike trail, and there's an existing sanitary sewer easement that runs through there with the sanitary sewer line. So we wouldn't be able to plant any big trees or shrubs on top of it.
So if you did away with the berm, could you plant shrubs on top of the soil to have a hedge around the building for landscape purposes? Cheaper than moving dirt.
Yes, we can add some shrubs in that area, yes.
So you would be amiable for putting shrubs up along that side
Yes,
and adding to the landscape?
correct.
Just to clarify, are you talking along Morgan Parkway?
Correct. I mean, it would be beautification for the walkers
Yeah.
Further
in the
questions?
park.
I had one, actually. You mentioned the glazing on the windows. To what degree, especially in that area of the building there, it appears that's mostly masonry, so there wouldn't be any transparency into the building along Morgan Parkway. Is that correct?
I would have to double check on that. I'm with civil, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to clarify, Madam Chair, so the glazing would actually be here on the western side of the building where the entrance is, and then the southern facade back here.
That's how I read it as well. I was just confirming that I understood it correctly. So thank you, Brian.
Of course.
All right.
Is this going to be a single tenant building?
If you can, yes, please go ahead, come up, state your name and address, and we'll,
So my name's George Billingsley, live at 5369 Tacoma Drive in Dallas, Texas. And yes, this will be a single-tenant building. The truck court's on the west side, which is relatively narrow, and so we don't have enough dock doors to accommodate a multi-tenant building. So if, for example, all the dock doors were on the north as we had originally imagined, that would be different, but it's just too narrow to accommodate that, yeah.
Do you have a tenant for the building?
I don't, no, I don't. So, but, you know, we own 6 buildings adjacent to this, one of which is in Farmers Branch and one of which is half in Farmers Branch, oddly. And those are all 100% leased and have been for a good while. So we're confident these will perform, and, you know, we're long-term holders, and so we anticipate holding these for the long term. And that's why we're investing quite a bit on the front end. And you'll see there is a lot of stone and landscaping and glazing, as you referenced. So that's part of our methodology as long-term holders, is to try and accentuate the buildings and embellish them on the front end, knowing we're going to hold them for a long time.
You don't have any problem with the additional landscaping, do you?
No, I was telling her before she came up, I mean, that's ancillary to me. I'm happy to do whatever y'all want on the landscaping, frankly.
That's important.
Good. No, we're happy to do it. So
Okay.
anything else I can answer?
Further questions? Go ahead, Pat.
So the reason you don't want to plant trees in the full length of the, or nearly the full length of the building facing Morgan Parkway, is it because of the sanitary
You know,
easement? I don't understand.
If I'm perfectly
why-
honest, I'm not 100% because I defer a lot to my team. But I think intuitively, I think part of it is we're going to have probably signage facing south. And so we didn't want to encumber that. But I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
Yes, so with the 12-foot hike and bike trail and then the existing sanitary sewer easement that's like 25 feet on the other side of the property line, there's just not enough room. So that's why we opted to add more trees on other portions of the site.
15 feet of
So
grass
the
is not enough to plant a tree? It's set back 15 feet from the sidewalk,
With branches.
and the canopy can overhang the sidewalk. I'm still confused as to why there's
we
an
can't
obstacle.
plant within the easement that's 25 feet wide. And that gets us pretty close to some entries of the doors to the building.
There's no doors on the south side, right?
That's the north, actually, but yes.
North is that way.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, north is up.
Yeah, thanks.
It might be beneficial to pull up the elevations of the building.
Yes, and I will clarify once more that this is actually the eastern elevation, so this will be where the entrance is. I believe I do have the building perspectives, if that would help. So,
Yes, and I wanted to clarify, I heard this earlier, and the glazing faces the south deliberately, because that's where there's going to be frontage, and that's where there's going to be people driving by and stuff. And so the glazing faces the south. And that's another reason why we don't want to have trees there, because there is going to be that aesthetic that we want to make visible and conspicuous, yeah. So that was maybe some confusion earlier as far as where the glass and the stone is facing, but it faces the south. Because the north, basically, no one's going to ever look at that. I mean, that's just up against the creek.
Right.
So just as a point of clarification. So yeah, we put all the frontage aesthetics and whatnot facing the east and the south, because those are the two places that they'll be recognized and appreciated.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
Yep. Further
So it
questions?
sounds like the trees are problematic on the front, but bushes aren't. Right, it sounds like we could probably do something with bushes.
For sure, we're happy to do
So-
bushes, and I would love to work with staff on that. That's really a very secondary consideration for us. It's not particularly expensive, so I'd be very happy to do candidly whatever y'all want us to do as it relates to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
All right.
Further questions? Think we're good? All right. Well, with that, it is a public hearing.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
All right. We had no one signed up to speak for D1, just clarifying that as well. So anyone want to second that?
I will second that.
All right. All those in favor to close the public hearing? All right. Thank you
Thank you.
again. All right. So with that, we will hear action on the item. I did want to just kind of recap. I was trying to keep some notes So I did hear some potential conditions discussed, and as we recommend approval, we can apply those. The things that I heard predominantly in respect to this were the landscaping, as we just discussed, potentially some shrubbery or bushes along the hike and bike trail on Morgan.
South side of the building.
South side, yes, thank you.
Now, should we put a distance between the bushes? Should we say a hedge X feet long? I mean, how can we word that? So, in other words, it's not a bush here and a bush here. It's like, in my mind, it's like a hedge, but
I wonder, Harold, if we could just, in our conditions, a request for additional landscaping for aesthetics and beautification along that. And in doing so, I think by highlighting the aesthetic nature of the reason for the request should ensure that it then meets that aesthetic desire. And I sensed from our applicant that they were highly amenable to that.
however everybody understands what the ultimate goal here is. I mean, you word it however you need to word it.
I would concur with Chair Rayleigh's recommendation.
Okay. So were there any additional conditions on this request that we found necessary, or was that was the issue?
Is the landscaping understood to be irrigated?
Yes, that is condition.
Okay, I would throw in there that part of the reason for the request is shade of the West Side Art Trail. So where possible and where it doesn't interfere with signage, using a shade tree, I think would be appropriate. Otherwise, shrubs and bushes are totally acceptable.
Right. So I appreciate that. So what I'm hearing you say is that we're, the reason for our request, we state very clearly the purpose of the additional landscaping is for shading along the hike and bike trail where possible, understanding their limitations with the easement and the amount of space, and further aesthetic improvement of the landscaping along that corridor.
Correct. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it is a functional purpose.
Yep.
Instead of purely aesthetic.
I appreciate that.
And just a quick point of clarification for that. So when you say the southern property line, you're referring to back here?
No, that's north.
I'm sorry, so along Morgan Parkway?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure I had that clear.
That's why I got backwards earlier.
Nobody looks at it from the north.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe we'll specify along the hike and bike trail.
Perfect.
All right. So I heard, again, that. Anyone willing to make that recommendation?
I'll move to approve 25 SPO3 as presented with the added stipulation of additional landscaping on the southern portion of the property near the West Side Art Trail.
Thank you for that.
I move to second that.
All right. And seconded. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor to recommend approval of 25 SPO3 with additional conditions of landscaping along the hike and bike trail for shading and aesthetics. All those in favor? All right, that's everyone. And this will go to City Council
August 19th.
August 19th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we'll have item D2, conduct a public hearing and consider the request for zoning amendment for industrial development on approximately 7.48 acres located at 2665 to 2775 Villa Creek Drive within PD 74 zoning district and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Chair Rayleigh and members of the P&Z. My name is Brett Mangum. I'm the lead planner here with the City of Farmers Branch, here to present case 25-ZA-07. This property is addressed as 2665 through 2775 Villa Creek Drive. And the request is a amendment to the existing plan development district to allow development of a new warehouse distribution center with office space. So a little bit of background on the subject site. This is composed of 2 tracts, approximately 7.5 acres altogether on the north side of Villa Creek Drive between Metro Boulevard and Josie Lane. The zoning on the site is part of a PD, Plan Development Number 74, which was established in 1996 through Ordinance Number 2248, and we'll come back and reference that in a moment. The PD was intended mainly for office and retail uses with high rises and hotels along the LBJ corridor that benefit from that frontage. And then as you get further north, mid-rise offices on the interior sites, and then gradually transitioning down into low-rise commercial development to the north as you encounter the established residential neighborhoods to the north and to the east. This request would amend the existing PD 74 to allow for the warehouse and distribution land use by right. And in addition, it will provide a concept plan as well as a landscape plan and building elevations. Additionally, there are some development standards associated with this request, and those will modify select characteristics of the site. We'll cover those in detail here in a moment. This is just an overall view of the concept plan showing the intended layout and function of the site. You can see it's a single building, total 126,000 square foot approximately. The breakdown of square footage within that 126,000 figure is 6,000 square foot of office space, and the remainder 120,000 square foot being dedicated to warehouse use. The height of the building varies on average. It's about 40 foot. It goes as high as 46 foot 8 inches at the highest point. On site, you'll find a total of 138 parking spaces, which meets the minimum requirements set forth in Ordinance 2248. The applicant is requesting modifications to the PD 74 standards for things such as setbacks, screening, site layout, and the site plan approval process. So to go into more details on those requested modifications, we'll start with the setbacks. PD 74 sets forth a residential proximity slope requirement for any properties that abut single-family or duplex zoning. To the north, you have a property which is zoned single-family and is used as a college, that is the campus of Dallas Christian College. So we have a situation where the land use and the zoning aren't quite in sync. However, we have to treat it as though it is zoned and used for single-family housing. So that would apply. They're requesting to have a waiver to that standard, and instead of the 3-to-1 residential proximity slope requirement, which would require 140-foot setback off that northern property line, they're requesting to just do a 95-foot building setback in lieu of that. And I do want to point out that the 2 portions on the end, those will be the 95-foot setback. A majority of the building will actually be set further back than the 95-foot. So, and it looks like it's about 120. So for a majority of the site, it will be 120-foot setback off of that northern property line. Second modification would be to allow for the placement of the truck loading doors, the bays, facing north again towards the single family that is restricted by PD with residential development in mind. However, a majority of this site, you can see on the aerial to the north where the college has one building, there's a parking lot, but a majority of that empty space to the eastern side is soccer fields currently. That's not saying it couldn't be developed in the future if the college decided to expand and add more buildings to that area, but that's what's currently on the site. Third, the applicant is requesting to allow for parking and driveways in the front yard of the building, which is defined as anything between the face of the building and the street right-of-way. So for Villa Creek, they are requesting 1 drive lane, dual loaded with parking on either side of that. The intention of the PD, I believe, is to push the buildings closer up to the street and then have the parking and loading areas in the rear where it's more hidden from view. So that is the third development standard. And the final one is the site plan approval process. What we're looking at tonight, this is part of a multi-step process. We're looking at the concept plan at this phase. That would be followed up by a detailed site plan at a later date. So before the land is entitled to be developed and before they can apply to get their building permits, a detailed site plan would need to be approved. Typically, that'll come back through the public hearing process, through you, and then to City Council for final approval. However, the applicant is requesting that the detailed site plan be delegated to staff approval through the Development Review Committee, or DRC, if that is a condition that is approved as part of this request. That would only be approved through staff as long as it meets substantially the conditions that you see before you, and that is inclusive of the site plan, building elevations, as well as the landscape plans. Any significant deviations from that would require a second round of public hearings. This shows the landscape plan for the site. The figure is approximately 16% of the total land area of the site will be dedicated to green space. With tree plantings along Villa Creek Drive, there's a total of 32 new tree plantings that will be spaced appropriately along that frontage. I also want to point out here on the landscape plan, you can see along Villa Creek, the applicant has added a 5-foot sidewalk along that entire street frontage, which is an enhancement to the current conditions where no sidewalk exists presently. And again, this phase, we are just looking at the concept site plan and the building elevations and landscape plan with a detailed site plan to come at a later date, potentially staff approved. Looking at our city's long-term plans, we have the Farmers Branch 2045 Comprehensive Plan, which was adopted in 2023. You can see the subject site in blue, the blue circle. The color there indicates future regional commercial on our map. I would point out that recommended uses for that type of use would be large footprint, big box stores, shopping centers, high intensity office and residential, service type uses. So restaurants and things of that nature. So with this being a more warehouse, auto truck oriented development that's not going to generate as much foot traffic and as much come and go traffic, this proposal was judged to be not consistent with the comprehensive plan future land use designation. As far as the public notice, we sent out 22 letters to property owners within 300 feet of the site. Sent those out on June 27th, which is the same day that we posted the signs on the property. As of today, we have received one response, which was in support. That was from an adjacent property, which is the Dallas Christian College campus. So they are supportive of the request as well as the conditions that are set forth in the request, including the wood fence. And we do have the applicant present. We have Jim Trainer with Foundry Commercial, and we also have Sony David and Yemi Durasawa with Langen. They're the engineers for this project, and Jim is the, I believe, representing the real estate transaction. They can answer any questions regarding the site. And we've got some additional slides here. If you need to flip back and forth, just let me know, and I'm happy to do so.
Thanks again, Brett. First question is for staff.
For staff, yeah. So the request to modify the site plan approval process, is this a typical request? I mean, it's interesting that they're being asked to change our processes, and I guess I'm wondering, why would we change our processes? What is it about them? Is this better? Is this unusual? Just curious about the background here.
I can only speak for myself. I have a limited horizon, so I've only been here about 6 months. The previous case, Ford Road and Villa Creek, which is a similar type of request in the vicinity, also went through that approval process. So it's not unheard of, but I wouldn't say it's typical. It does save the applicant some time frame because public hearing process, we have requirements that we have to meet by state law that have delays built into them for reasons in order to encourage, public awareness of these developments. So it is up to you. That's a condition that's being requested. And if the P&Z as a body feels like that is not a condition you're willing to accept, you can strike that from the list.
I mean, is the planning department neutral on this request? I mean, is this?
Yes, we don't issue staff recommendations per se, so
Right. I'm just
wouldn't.
curious as to whether, I mean, in some regards, you might think of it as they were going around you, but I'm not picking that up. Sounds like this seems to you to be a reasonable request.
Absolutely. I'll just add a bit of context to what Brett provided. The approval process for detailed site plans depends on the zoning district. So Our newer zoning districts, you often see detailed site plan approval delegated to staff. That's only if it matches what is shown on the conceptual plan approved by city council. If they want to expand the building or deviate significantly, it triggers a whole new public hearing process. Like Brett mentioned, the intention for staff approval would just be to speed up the development timeline and allow for, once we get the utility details, the detailed landscape plan, some of the extra information that comes with the detailed site plan, we would verify it as staff and be able to approve it that way. If they needed to deviate from any of the PD standards, like we saw with our previous request, where they couldn't meet the tree spacing requirement, that would trigger a public hearing as well. And so it is typical of newer PDs. This is, PD 74 was created originally in the 90s, I believe. And so this is the approval process that was in place at that time. And I would just add quickly that this type of approval process was just approved for the Ford Road cases. So it would line up with that amendment.
Thank you, Sarah. Further questions for staff? Go ahead.
You said, if I understood correctly, this would not only approve this project, but change PD 74 so that by right, everything in PD 74 would be able to put in warehousing? Is that?
So this would only apply to the subject tract. It's tied to a legal description, which is the 7.5 acres. So it wouldn't affect the entire PD.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good distinction to make.
Other questions for staff?
Out of curiosity, with some of the other warehouse requests, we've seen traffic studies. Are we not seeing a traffic study with this because it is a conceptual site plan, or what triggers that process?
That's a good question. So as part of the review process before it gets here to the public hearing phase, our development review committee, DRC, looks at this as a whole, and it's composed of various different city departments that are relevant to the development. So our engineering team did take a look at this, and at the time they reviewed it, TIA was not deemed to be necessary. I believe the reasoning, and I'm not the engineer, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but my recollection of what the engineer said at the time when we had our meeting is that the office buildings that are there presently generate more traffic than a warehouse development of this size would. So it's actually, in their mind, a lesser impact. So that was why they determined that the TIA, or traffic impact analysis, was not necessary at this time.
And do you know if that is under the assumption that the office building is 100% occupied, or is that at current levels?
I wouldn't be able to speak with 100% certainty on that, but it's my presumption that it would be at full capacity.
Further questions for staff? All right, thanks again. I believe our applicant is here, so if you wouldn't mind, please come and state your name and address for the record, and we'll likely have some questions for you.
Hi, I'm Jim Trainer, 3500 Maple Avenue in Dallas, Texas.
Good evening. My name is Sonny David. I'm with Langen Engineering. Address is 2999 Olympus Boulevard, Dallas, Texas.
Thank you, gentlemen. And questions for our applicant?
I drove that area this morning, primarily looking for, because you're going to be talking about tractor trailer rigs and larger, and there probably will be fewer of those than automobiles if you look at it from that kind of perspective. The thing I'm concerned about is how many turns they're going to have to make accessing from 635 and/or Interstate 35. First of all, because at the intersection of Villa Creek and Josie, that would cause a huge nightmare. And I'm just talking about normal industrial warehouse property trucking, because there's no signal light there. I mean, cars have a difficult time navigating that intersection as we speak at this time of day. So my thought process was, to limit truck traffic from Josie down to that first driveway on the east side. But I don't know the width, and couldn't tell the width of the driveway you're proposing for an 40-foot trailer to make that turn and drive up to the north into that property. And that drawing may not be to scale, but, and then when truck drivers leave the property, how do you make them not turn back to the east and go up Villa Creek to the red light? I mean, I think if you turn this building into that kind of traffic, it's gonna be a huge problem, in my mind. And I don't know, I just see a problem down the road, because it's hard to access this property, right? I mean, it's a difficult access as you drive over there today. If you don't know how to get there, how are you gonna tell a truck driver to get there who's coming from Oklahoma City?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. You know, one of the things that we're considering, and just as a start, I guess, really the type of building and the type of use that's expected for something like this is going to be a much smaller scale than it would be a larger box. So even though as large as this building may look, the shallow bay nature of this building, the type of tenants that it draws are going to be smaller scale tenants. And so while you will have some tractor trailers, I would just envision more box trucks and other things like that accessing and using this specific type of use. To your point also about the two driveways, they can easily accommodate a tractor trailer accessing the driveways from the roadway. And then to also get to your point about just the access along Josie Lane and coming into Villa Creek, I think really where they would be going is probably along the TxDOT frontage road, and using that to then come back either on Metro or either Ford in order to access the property and minimize that kind of pinch point that you have closer to Josie Lane and Villa Creek Drive.
And that would be the perfect deduction. When you said box truck, I mean, I know what that is. Do you have a tenant in mind for this property? Because I used to have a part-time job loading freight, so I know what city delivery is, I know what over the road is, and I'm trying to get a concept of what kind of operation you think you're gonna lease this to, because that affects traffic.
Of course. And so I didn't say, I'm with the developer Foundry Commercial. And so the tenants that we typically are building for in this project is going for is smaller tenants that would be like showroom type of groups, so granite, countertops and, high-end like HVAC groups, things like that, where people want to come in and see the space, hardwood floor. So it usually, has the ability to take a tractor trailer, and we design it for that, but they're very rare to come into the space. So on most times it's box trucks or local delivery that are smaller in nature, vans, things like that.
What kind of finish out do you anticipate for the office versus warehouse?
Yeah, we've seen anywhere from, it can be depending on the use, as low as 5% up to, higher than that, 10% type of office finish. But we do typically see it be in that range, But we can see tenants want to fully HVAC the space depending on what they're doing in it and what they're actually working on in the space.
So are you looking at 4 or 5 tenants in this building?
Yes, sir.
In perfect scenario?
Perfect scenario would be 4 tenants.
Okay. I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to try to be negative. I'm just trying to make this property fit in this particular location, because the other issue I think is a problem is the noise in the residents in the apartment complex, in the college behind it, because the wooden fence bothers me also. There's got to be a better fix for that, but somebody else will mention that.
I'm happy to talk about that as well, because I think for us 2 things are important while we're here now. One is for us, to your access question as well, it's marketability, right? Like we need to lease this project and we want to drive jobs here in the community. Right. So access is super important to us as well. And so we felt like between Ford Road, Metro Boulevard, that there was enough access to cater to the tenants that we're going for. If this was a big bulk distribution building where we're seeing a lot of tractor trailers, we would agree with you that it wouldn't work. So we feel comfortable with the access there and can help with signage and direction to make sure that it flows with the community and what's planned in the future for what other properties have been recently changed as well. As far as the fencing goes, I did meet with Christopher Winslow at the college to discuss that and offered up masonry walls or the fencing. And what we felt like in working with Langen was a two-pronged approach of doing the fencing plus the landscaping provided the best aesthetic to the college, and it felt more residential in nature versus just a blank wall. And I think they agreed, and so we felt like that would be a better approach because we can make it look nicer for the group. Also, what we do, and we recently did at another office teardown project on a fence, is that we put posts much more frequently than you typically see to help with wind and sturdiness of the fence so that it's not falling over. And we're happy to do that here as well. It's important to us. And then what we found long term is that the maintenance of that is much easier to keep it nice looking, versus a masonry wall. So we wanted to combine landscaping and the fence together to just provide the best aesthetic for them looking at it.
What about the sound aspect? I mean, because my thought for masonry was a wall like we have on 635 freeway. And I don't know how tall that wall is, but because I'm thinking of the apartment project in that northeast corner of your property, there's a residential area right there, and those people may not have a clue about what we're doing here tonight. And they're gonna raise Cain after y'all start working. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, so. Anyway.
And I would say, just to answer to your question over there, that the thought process was really providing that layered approach, right? Having these plantings that are going to be in a pretty closely spaced scenario, really being a fill in the area, also going above the fence in terms of when they actually do reach maturity and get higher in terms of that landscaped edge along the back edge, and that seems to be a better scenario when we're looking at things of just visual barriers, sound barriers. And then when you specifically look at that corner, like you mentioned, and we were looking at that as well, when you start looking at getting more coverage in that corner, what we actually do provide over there is even more trees and more things like that within the nature to provide a little bit more of a buffer between the two areas. Yeah, in that corner specifically where you're talking about, where you're catty corner to those existing single family homes. And that's really what we were trying to do. And then also just wanted to add in there as well that the way and the nature that it was placed was actually specifically placed having the fence along the neighboring property and then the planting on the interior edge in order specifically on the northern side to allow that the drainage easement to continually function as we want it to. Yeah. We didn't want to have plants and other things like that, then having fallen leaves and other things like that within the drainage. And that allows also on the maintenance side to have all the maintenance occur within the interior of the property versus having to go over on the other side of the fence and have that occur as well.
Does the city maintain that drainage easement? Somebody's maintaining it.
It's a 30-foot drainage easement that buffers both sides.
Right. I believe it's on private property. I'm not certain on the maintenance responsibility, but I can look into it and provide that information.
Okay, I mean, like I said, it's nice and clean, and blooming trees, and looks really nice right now. So somebody's doing something there. That's all the questions. So anybody else just jump in, please.
All right, go ahead.
I'm confused, I guess. You had mentioned the use of landscaping to soften the appearance from the outside, but as I understand this, all that the people on the east side of the property can see is a fence. They won't be able to see any of the landscaping, so landscaping is on the other side of the fence. So the landscaping to the people outside of your property has no aesthetic benefit at all, does it?
It'll actually, at full height, it'll be 12 to 15-ish feet higher. And so then anything above the fence, you'd see the growth and everything else like that above that area.
Go ahead.
Do you have planned tenants currently?
Sorry, that-
Do you have planned tenants currently?
no, this is a speculative project.
Okay. I guess in the industries that you described, countertops, high-end furnishings, that doesn't sound like a 24-hour operation. Do limitations on hours of operations tank this project, or, how can we?
It's difficult to foresee kind of what uses would be required, from a time standpoint. I don't envision, trucks needing to come in the middle of the night for deliveries or things like that. I don't know always when even FedEx operates, right? But if there's people wanting to do things early in the day within the space, if they're, working on something, I just don't want to limit our potential for driving the best tenants for the project and for the community by hours of things I can't foresee.
Yeah, so on the east side, currently between the apartments and the existing office building, there's nothing, it's just parking lot, right? And then this now has the vegetation and a fence, and sort of that fence makes sense in the back. I'm wondering, going back to the question about what the apartments see, would the apartments want that fence, or might they be just as happy or even happier with just the vegetation? Because that would create some screening, but it wouldn't be quite so hard. I know you're putting it there to be a good neighbor. I'm just, a fence there might actually make it feel a little bit more closed in, whereas if it were left it with vegetation, it might just feel a little more open and natural.
Do we have this here? Yeah. Yeah, I think we'd be open to whatever is better for the
Maybe
residents.
getting together with that apartment complex
Right.
next door and just
Yeah,
see what they
we
think.
would be, comfortable with whatever is, is comfortable for
What
you.
about security, along the same lines, what about security concerns?
Right.
A chain link fence, I'm just talking about.
Typically for security purposes, we would fence the properties in, but it can be either an iron fence is kind of what we would prefer instead of a chain link fence, just for the security there. And we could do that on either side. So that could be a potential down the road that if a tenant required it, but again, because this is multi-tenant, we're not going to secure it fully. It doesn't move the needle per se, but we do like to kind of control the space and make sure it's secure. And we really do that a lot with, the layout of the building.
Further questions for our applicant? All right, a reminder, this is a public hearing. I do have some folks signed up to speak. I just have one, so if anybody else is wishing to speak, please do fill out a form. They're in the rear and bring that forward. Up first, we'll have Barbara Leedy. Forgive me if I've mispronounced that, but. And just please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Barbara Leedy. I live at 2803 Sunny Hill Lane, about 320 feet from the northeast corner of this thing. Sorry, I just heard about this morning, so I'm a little disjointed. The goal as a council, planning and zoning board, should be proper stewardship of this city. Your legacy should be when you leave, things are better than when you found them. To that, we enforce standards. We have a master plan. This does not meet the master plan. And I just heard earlier from the gentleman back here that the variance on the Wyndham, that the PD 74 or whatever it was on the frontage road, high rises and hotels. Now we have another warehouse. I put on social media today talking about this. I was here in front of you when the first three were approved and expressed my concerns. None of these projects at that time were in compliance with the city's existing zoning, nor of the master plan. The State of the City meeting a couple of years ago now, the mayor stated that this kind of development would be west of 35 and east of Midway. You guys are mission creeping into neighborhoods. This is my neighborhood. This is where I live. This is where I have put roots. And now this is going to be in your backyard. Do you want this in your backyard? Is this what you want to hear all hours of the day and night? As it is, I already hear TxDOT and the freeway. Now I get to hear and possibly see this. As to Villa Creek and the software with the truck drivers, they don't use it. Semis come up and down Villa Creek. My husband recently saw a semi go north on Ford and try to go west on Farmers Branch Lane. He said he had a lot of fun watching him back up once he realized that it was closed at Denton. The bridge on Ford is not set up for the weight of semis. It's probably and I've bicycled Ford Road. It's not set up for high traffic of any kind. I really don't think this is a great idea. Let's stick to the master plan because, you know, strike one, the first 3 warehouses, strike 2, the 4th warehouse. This would be the 3rd strike, guys, and at what point is the master plan just a doorstop? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please just come up and I'll take your paper, and if you wouldn't mind, state your name and address for the record.
Alrighty.
If I could have your
Deliver
paper.
this first?
Yes, if
All
you
right.
don't mind. Thank you kindly.
Thanks. My name is John Stepaniak. I'm at 2752 Bay Meadows, which is in the 300 feet, I guess, extended area you guys had on the map. And this is kind of improv on my part because I didn't realize we were going to be allowed to speak. But just some concerns that I think we should address in more detail regarding this. I believe the previous speaker raised a concern directed at 18-wheelers or, you know, the big, I think, 32-ton trucks. Are they truly required to be servicing that site? Or can the site with the engineers be made to work using only like 2-ton, 5-ton, and maybe 10-ton type trucks? What would the operating hours of the site be? Security lighting, would it be massively bright in an attempt to deter, you know, cargo theft, et cetera, et cetera? Deterring cargo theft with massively bright lights would also flood into the surrounding properties. Whether the trees could be double stacked or something, so to speak, or fence designed specifically for sound deadening purposes, or have sound deadening considerations built into the design of the fence. And would the presence of this warehouse or trucking or, you know, cargo shipment building, would that cause other office buildings to fail eventually and thus lead to additional requests for expanded shipping terminal space? In other words, would the area slowly grow from predominantly office and religious college into a increasingly large shipping terminal? And then last aspect, I don't know of how much of a concern it is, but maybe consult with the Farmers Branch Police and see if there would be a possible increase of working girls from non-existent to maybe a visible number, because sometimes these trucking businesses can attract, you might say, spin-off industries that might not be fully legal or legal at all. And what do they feel about that? I don't know how real, you know, if that's a true concern or not. But I think all concerns need to be advanced further, especially if 18-wheelers are truly needed at that site. And the possibility of other office buildings failing.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you, Kyle. And if you would just please state your name and address into the microphone for us.
Donna Stepaniak, 2752 Bay Meadows Court, Farmers Branch.
Thank you.
Yes, and I am living with my husband directly behind within 300 square feet. And my concern is I'm a very large sleeper, and I already hear the dumping of trucks off of Jersey. So, we already have the dirt mound off of Jersey by LBJ and the other single family housing. So if y'all do a warehouse on the other side of north of LBJ, in between the college, I think it will really inhabit the beauty of Farmers Branch. And then also the safety nets, because I'm already, when I moved in about 9 years ago, they had trees that almost blocked the college and the soccer field. And now the trees are gone. And then I see and hear the traffic from Farmers Branch from the highway, especially in my backyard. So I'm very concerned that it's going to bring down my property value. Also, we are concerned about the water runoff from the concrete that y'all may be replacing over there. Like when it rains, will it go down into the creek because the runoff is kind of like going downhill from the highway. So I'm kind of concerned about the drainage and everything. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
And I believe we had someone else. Thank you. And just a reminder to state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Coleman. I'm at 2885 Meadowport Drive, so I'm in the 300-foot zoning perimeter. My main concerns that Harold and actually Colin brought up are 18-wheeler traffic. I work in logistics, so I see 18-wheelers driving in and out all day. Turning off of the access road onto Villa Creek from Josie, that segment of Josie is maybe 2 car lengths. So if there's any 18-wheeler traffic whatsoever, while other cars are present, they could potentially block all of Josie on either side. That is going westbound. Now coming out of Villa Creek, going, eastbound, trying to turn onto the highway, I don't think an 18-wheeler can make that turn. Once again, it's like 3 or 4 car lengths before you can turn onto the access road. And it is consistently full. I drive that every single day on my way to work. Additionally, light. We already get light from the college in our backyard. So more light, if it's facing outward from the building, is just gonna pollute the light that we already have. So if they're going to put lights maybe along the tree line on the back facing inward to the building, so it's not facing any of the residential areas. And the noise, if this is a 24-hour operation, you're gonna hear 18-wheelers honk, cars honk, people talk, other cars from the traffic of workers coming in and out. It just adds to the already noise pollution that we already have living so close to 635. So, and then this is my husband, Josh.
Great, thank you.
My name is Josh Coleman. I live also at 2885 Meadowport Drive. As I heard someone previously say, She said, this is our neighborhood. It is our neighborhood. It's her neighborhood. We didn't buy a house here to have her live in a warehouse district. We didn't buy a house here to have her worry about trucks driving along. And I know the gentleman said, we don't think there's gonna be 18-wheelers. We don't foresee 18-wheelers. They didn't say there won't be 18-wheelers. We don't know that. What if they can't lease this space to high-end countertop manufacturers and other things like that? And pretty soon, all those pretty little parking spots turn into loading zones for 18-wheelers. And as my wife said earlier, that intersection at Via Creek and Josie Lane, if you don't live here, you don't know that you've got to keep space. You can't pull all the way up. You have to keep space in between. If you live here, you know, space in between. And that's just for normal traffic. That's not delivery traffic. That's not exit traffic. This is going to cause an entire cluster, for lack of a better word, of traffic and problems. It's going to create more noise than we already have from the freeway, because that's already a big problem on that side of the road in the neighborhood that we live in. We didn't buy a house in a warehouse zone. We bought a house in a neighborhood. We want a house in a neighborhood. We don't want a warehouse run. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, a reminder, this is a public hearing. I don't believe we have anyone else signed up to speak, but thank you to all of those who did. We've had a lot of discussion. I believe there's a number of conditions our folks have asked for and ones we may want to apply. Do we want any discussion of that before we close the public hearing
Well, yeah, I think I guess it just depends on how you visualize this. In one visualization, it could be a brightly lit parking lot that's busy, could be 24/7, loading doors, going up and down, people talking. So it could be a loud, bright operation, which would disturb the apartments to the east and the houses to the north. On the other hand, it's like maybe it's not so bright, maybe it's a more of a low volume operation and it only operates, it shuts down by 10 o'clock or something, you know what I mean? It's like, for me, it's kind of, it's like what is this thing really? You know, which of those two extremes is the reality? So I guess maybe the developer could maybe just talk to the lighting, that just help there a little bit, like what kind of lighting and what can be done to keep that from disturbing the neighbors?
Sure, yeah, happy to, and want to make sure this works for everybody. Typically what we do and what we plan here is pack lighting on the buildings that directs down to create additional security but not spread. We can provide a lighting study during the site plan review as well that will show the distance that the light travels, how to make sure it doesn't go beyond the property bounds and it shoots out our property and down lit.
Thank you. Further questions?
Yes,
Discussion?
regarding the truck traffic, you did mention that you didn't think it would be 18-wheelers. Is there something about this warehouse, be it the size of the warehouse, the depth of the bays, that prohibit 18-wheeler traffic, or is that just an assumption on your behalf?
Yeah, I'd say it's a couple things. One is, we do design and there are ability to have the tractor trailers come in the property and safely maneuver it. But this is designed, and the market here in Farmers Branch is smaller tenant driven. And so what we've seen is that we don't get a lot of that traffic, which is why we designed this way. So you have to work your way around the property. It's not conducive to have a lot of those tractor trailers come through. This is a 125 truck court. Typically we see for those larger trailers to be 130, 135 and larger, in which we've designed on some of our other buildings that are conducive to that type of user. And I would say, Farmers Branch commands some of the highest rents in the entire market for industrial. So if you're looking at this office building today, it's a Class C office building built in the 1970s. It is one of the most affordable office buildings in the city and attracting tenants that are looking for the cheapest space. we're going to be commanding the highest rents, which are going to be substantially higher than even the office. And so we have seen this, the tenant quality and safety of these properties improve. This is going to be our 7th, we're working on 7 different office demolitions where we're converting to industrial, and the cities have been supportive because they know the tenant change and quality change that's happening. And this particular property is not, from my understanding of the seller, not financially feasible anymore. So I think you're going to see a continued deterioration and safety concerns of the existing property. So again, our goal in hearing the concerns is to make neighborhoods better, and this is the highest and best use from a property standpoint to actually afford repurposing it and not allowing it to go downhill.
Thank you for that. Further questions for our applicants or discussions around some of these conditions or issues that may come up as we?
Is there any additional noise or visibility abatement that could be done in the northeast corner back there to put those extra 3 trees? And for the single-family homes back over there, is there anything that could be done back there that might create more of a sound barrier? And maybe put a masonry wall back there or something that does?
Right, because it feels like the biggest concern is this top right corner here, and we're open to any suggestions or thoughts of how to do that. That would be good for the community for sure. So I think we try to suggest some bigger, better trees in that area with the fencing, but if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, I think we could work with staff and come up with a solution, especially in that corner where you're concerned about, and work through a couple options, and then again take into consideration things that they recommend as well.
Because we have citizens here that spoke tonight, it may be a good idea for the staff to help us clarify master plan. One of the citizens mentioned stick to the master plan, so that all of us can understand that we really are sticking to the master plan, but it's kind of one of those living, breathing documents. And I recall this property, for example, on Ford Road, was, believe it or not, zoned retail somehow. And we even had a discussion a year or so back, how the heck could this property be zoned retail on Ford Road? And I don't think anybody really came up with an answer. So, and the point I'm trying to make is, I think we are trying to stick to the master plan, but what we have to look at is what is the highest and best use of this property compared to what it was 45 years ago and to what it may be today. And that's, staff can probably explain that better than I can.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that a bit. When we're looking at planning documents for this proposal, there's the zoning, which is Plan Development 74. That is the current law that is in place for this parcel. The future land use map is part of the 2045 comprehensive plan, which is more of a long-range vision document. It is not law for this property. It does not determine which uses can be permitted on this site. And it's also not intended to be parcel specific. So you'll see the area circled in blue is the general location of this site, and this darker red color is the regional commercial designation. And so it does extend all the way along the 635 frontage as you get closer to Marsh Lane. And so the reason that designation was put in place is because of commercial access to highway frontage. It makes sense from a development perspective, but as you get into this specific area, some of the concerns that you mentioned regarding access and visibility for the site, specifically west of Josie Lane, come into play. Those are some of the reasonings that were cited with the previous zoning request. Was, although the plan says this is a good place for a commercial hub, realistically, the conditions that exist today and are likely to continue with the future construction along I-35 and the current access along 635 make it less conducive to retail. And so what we have today is aging office buildings. Those are consistent with the zoning that was approved in the 90s. And so that is the use that's continued to today. But as we look ahead, the Farmers Branch 2045 plan is a guide. If we continue to see zoning changes in this area that are not fully in line with the comprehensive plan, we would recommend updating the plan to reflect a different type of classification. Because as one speaker mentioned, as we start to see more of these zoning requests, the character of this area is changing from office and low density development to more of an industrial, light industrial warehousing district. And so what I would probably suggest is when you look on the other side of I-35, you'll see this purple color, which is commercial or industrial employment center. And that's differentiated from the gray color, which is a wider industrial category. And so that commercial industrial employment center is probably what would be appropriate for this district, given the type of development that's been approved recently. And if this request were approved by City Council, that would fall more in line with that category. So it's something to consider. This request is not fully in line with the comprehensive plan designation, which is fair to say. But it is not a binding document for zoning.
Thanks, Sarah, for that clarification.
Thank you.
Other discussion, and also a reminder, we're still in our open public meeting, so we can continue to discuss, but if we're feeling confident in a direction, let me know.
What if the applicant, after hearing some of the comments tonight, what if we gave the applicant an opportunity to address some of these issues on their own and come back to us and say, you know, we've thought about A, B, and C, and we've come up with these possibilities? Would anybody see that as being appropriate?
So what I'm hearing you say is potential to table this for a future meeting, and that would create some delay.
Yeah, but I think that, I mean, so if you could address the concerns of the neighborhoods on the east and the northeast, it's just slowing down a little bit. I mean, I think we would all feel better if the neighborhood, if there could be a way that everybody could be happy. And it sounds to me like the developers, I mean, I know they don't want to go to slow down, but they sound very amenable to working with their neighbors. This would be an opportunity to slow down a bit and give them the opportunity to do that.
That's just an idea. I mean, I'm open for whatever, and the developer may want to say, have a comment about it too, also.
And Sarah, I do understand, and just correct me if I'm wrong, it's likely that our next planning and zoning meeting would have likely been canceled because I don't think there were items scheduled for that.
Currently, that is the plan, yes. Additionally, if there are going to be changes to these documents, we would need some time to work with the applicant. I would throw out the possibility of if there are specific concerns that you would like forwarded to City Council, we could work with the applicant in the interim before City Council hears this case and makes a final decision. If you don't feel like you have enough information to make a recommendation tonight, you can certainly table to a future meeting. But in order to move the project forward, something to consider would be forwarding to Council with a list of modifications that you feel would be beneficial. And then those will be presented as part of the request.
Thank you, Sarah, for letting us know some of our options. Commissioners, how are we feeling?
I mean, I think the issue is that you've got a change in occupancy here, and there's not a huge distance of buffer between residential area and what is turning into a little industrial center. Normally, when I think of that, there should be transitional spaces before you get into high occupancy industrial uses. Right now, we've got the buffer area of the soccer field, and then there are some apartments, and then not too far away begins the neighborhood. I think there is possibility for the applicant to provide more clarity on how they could protect that neighborhood. So I'm not opposed to delay.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So I'm hearing some sense around tabling. You have a,
I just have one more question for the applicant, if that's
yep.
allowable. Do you have any other types of developments, or are you strictly warehouse?
Our company does warehouse, office, retail, and seniors housing. This is our primarily for new construction development warehouse, and the marketplace is the most active.
Okay, thank you. And the reasoning for that question is, yes, obviously this area is turning into a more industrial, light industrial area than is slated in the master plan, and maybe more so than some residents would like, but it doesn't really sound like we have regional commercial, beating the door down to develop this area. So to the applicant's point, we now have a warehouse that is declining in both condition and occupancy, and the question becomes, what can we do? Because the other options, we have an empty building, and I don't think that's good for the neighborhood either. So I think I'm open to tabling as well, with the understanding that we're looking for clarification on the types of traffic, the hours of operation, and what can be done as far as acoustics. Just limiting the effect on the surrounding neighborhoods.
Lighting.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a benefit to us making a recommendation with our concerns noted and just punt it to the city council and be like, here's why we said what we did? And then city council's got the ultimate authority to choose. We can vote to either approve or deny based on our concerns and say, and I'm just bullet point all of the concerns. If it sounds like there's a preference to move it forward.
Yeah, I will, you are right that we are a recommending body. So regardless of our actions today, even if we table and move further, our next step would be a recommendation for approval or a recommendation for denial at the city council. So that is certainly an option. As is table, I mean, these are all valid options. I would say, from my understanding, tabling it would mean that we didn't have sufficient information to inform that decision of recommending approval or recommending denial.
I'm sorry, if it is possible, I think providing some conditions that you do have relative to areas of concern would allow us then the opportunity to then, as the city planner had mentioned, the opportunity to come back with some more definitive answers and work with staff on those areas to then provide maybe even exhibits that define how we're going to be addressing those areas. Some of the things that I was thinking about just as we were discussing it is potentially even adding a higher berm area in that corner to have planting even be at a higher elevation and kind of mitigate some of those things that you're talking about relative to sound and things like that. But as we can kind of work through the conditions that you may present, it may help us provide answers to those things that you guys are most concerned about.
Thank you. Commissioners?
So is there enough time between now and when the city council would see it? So one option is we could recommend approval to the city council, but all these lists of things that we feel like they must address to do that. But that's what, 2 weeks out? Is that enough time? Is it about 2 weeks for city council to, I'm just wondering, is that enough time for y'all to do what you have to do and really come up with those kind of recommendations?
This case is slated for city council on August 19th if it moves forward tonight. So there is a bit of time. Now the items need to be finalized, obviously in advance of that. The packet is posted at least a week in advance. And so if there are significant changes to the site plan, we would need those fairly quickly.
Just to answer your question, that would be sufficient time, and we would like to come up with something that does appease the neighborhood. It is important to us that we do have support, and we'd be happy to present those individually to those individuals if they'd like and discuss it as well. But I believe we can come up with something and present it to council that we believe would address those concerns. And to Colin's point, really improve the neighborhood overall in our view too.
Thank you. Thank you again. So commissioners, do we have enough information? Well, and we are still in our public meeting, but I want to, before we move there, do we feel we have sufficient information?
Is timing an issue for some reason? I mean, because if we were to reject it, just solely, didn't approve anything, then they would still have time to go back and make their changes and then present it to city council. So, I mean, we could do that.
I'm not going to speak for the seller, but I don't know their time constraints on transacting on the property given underlying financial conditions of the property. But the timeline that we have is really the only one we can operate under with the city council meeting on the 19th. So it would, I can't speak for the seller if they could change the timeline.
So, I mean, you would rather go to city council on the 19th, and that may be the answer. Just us disapprove it, city council, but they can work on it.
Well, again, the real question is if we have enough information to recommend approval or recommend denial, and then we'll hear a motion of which direction commissioners feel comfortable with and have a vote, of course, after closing the public meeting. Don't let me forget that.
Yeah, I mean, are we ready to, so I'll make a motion that we close the public meeting.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the item before doing so?
I do have one question for our legal counsel.
Yep.
There are some questions that we cannot ask as planning and zoning that would be more appropriate for city council, correct?
That's correct.
So something about like the tax implications to the city from one development to the next, that is something that is not for us to.
I would legally recommend that that's something that this board or commission should stay away from, but that is within the purview of the city council.
Okay. With that, I'm inclined to offer approval with conditions. And yes, yeah.
We need to vote on closing the
Oh,
public
yeah.
meeting.
Well, hold second. Oh, yeah. Guess we can vote on that.
Okay, so we're confident with closing the public, we've concluded discussion on that item. Could we start over on having a motion there?
Yeah, can I just clarify? So a motion was made to close the public hearing and was seconded. Can we now have a vote on that, just to clarify?
Yep, that's what I was doing. I was asking for the motion again, now that so I was just backing it up even another step.
Perfect.
But yes, that's where we're at. Okay, we can proceed to vote, I'm hearing. Okay, so all those in favor to close the public hearing? All right, that's everybody. Okay, so with that, we will hear action on the item.
I will move to recommend with the conditions of additional screening for functions of acoustics and lighting. And also, I don't know if I can do this, pending further study of the type of vehicle that will traffic the site.
So just to clarify, you said recommend, you mean recommend approval?
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying, with conditions around screening, and would you consider that then maybe a traffic description, or how would you best define that?
To jump in,
I'm struggling with the definition.
other developments have provided truck ingress and egress diagrams showing anticipated routes, as well as trip generation information. So we could work with the applicant on those specifics.
Have we ever done something with like truck tonnage, truck length?
Go ahead.
Not to be obnoxious here, but just to be clear, we do have a motion on the table and might be a little confusing to get into questions for staff at this point.
And can I just, and continue with your motion to stipulate that the developers work with the owners of the apartments and the single-family homes in that process, that they work and hopefully gain some approval from them.
So what I'm hearing is a clarification on the motion, or a second with further conditions. So right now, as I understand it, the conditions on the table for the motion is to recommend approval with conditions of additional screening for acoustics and lighting, traffic ingress and egress, and request for coordination with other local property owners.
Possibly hours of operation. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Got several head nods, yes.
Okay, so amending my list, what I hear, and you can confirm that this is the motion that you're putting forward, is a recommendation for approval with conditions of screening for acoustics and lighting, truck ingress and egress, coordination with local property owners, and defined hours of operation.
Yes.
That is your motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Landscape.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a seconded motion. Any further discussion on the item?
What about landscaping? Fence, landscaping,
Well, there is the condition for the wall.
Would the screening with attention to acoustics and lighting cover the landscaping in our description?
I'm just thinking, somebody mentioned earlier, we would have the wall, we would have landscaping on the inside property line of the wall. But do we need to mention landscaping with the fence? Question mark.
That's an open question. Do we feel that our conditions as stated in the motion and second cover that potential concern? Do you feel that it's adequately covered?
If everybody else does, I do.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's addressed.
Okay. So we've had a motion and a second. I won't go through detailing them all again. I think I've tried to make it very clear so that we're clear. All right. Any further discussion on the item? All right. We will move to a vote. All those in favor to recommend approval with conditions as stated previously? All right. Recommend denial? Thank you. And so this will go to City Council again on August 19th. Thank you all for your time. With that, we will adjourn. It is 8:32 p.m. Thank you all.